right, it is 9 o'clock, and let's call the Utility Commission meeting to order for February. Everybody, I don't know what happened to Mr. Bloomstein. Did he get? He resigned.
He resigned due to health issues.
Okay. So, first order of business is approval of the minutes. Does anybody have any additions or corrections to the minutes? Hearing none, shall I entertain a motion to approve them? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Public comment, there is no public. So I guess there's no public comment, so we can go into new business. And City, you start off with the first quarter financial report and variance analysis.
Got all kinds of pieces of paper here. Give me just a second. What I hope you received was a copy of two pieces of information electronically. That's the first quarter financial report and also the first quarter variance analysis that goes with that report. This represents the results of the first quarter of fiscal 14-15, so October through December of last year. In terms of our variance analysis, the criteria for providing an analysis of a budget to actual variance is two things. One, the item has to be plus or minus 10% away from pro rata year to date. So in the case of the first quarter, it has to be under 15% or over 35%. And second, in conjunction with that, the line item itself has to be bigger than $70,000, which prevents us from analyzing variances for tiny things that really have no impact on the budget. And so given those two things, if you want, probably the best thing to do is we'll turn to page 2 of 5 of the variance analysis, which is where we begin with the utility variances and talk about some of the differences we've seen in the first quarter between what we budgeted and what we've actually experienced. You know, one of the things that we have in these variance analysis very consistently are items which are off the pro rata because they aren't expended on a pro rata basis. Whether they be revenues or expenditures, these are items that are essentially always going to be variances because they are never going to come in at 1/12 per month of what we've budgeted them at. And as a consequence, what you'll see for those is variance within normal parameters, where it's something that we've talked about in the past that we know is always going to be a variance, but we still address it here. So beginning on page 2 of 5, if everyone's with me, electric fund revenues, we don't have any variances that meet the criteria for analysis at this point in the year. We're very close to our original estimates for revenues, and we'll talk about that with the second agenda item. As far as variances within expenditures, we've got variances on the salaries due to fairly substantial turnover in T&D, and so we're actually under budget. That's a positive variance. We've got a number of items, particularly insurance, that fall within normal variances because we pay insurance on a quarterly basis, and we pay it before the beginning of the quarter. So by the end of the first quarter, we've made half a year's worth of insurance payments. And so you're always going to see variances there. And in the case of the boiler insurance, we pay the entire premium up front. The boiler insurance actually is a little over budget even for having paid the entire premium up front. What we discovered when we actually got into the nuts and bolts of the renewal is this is what covers some of the very aging machinery in the power plant, and our renewal was a bit more than we expected. And we're taking some steps to either, as we shut down some of the units, to get some money back for this or to mitigate this and bring it back a little. But we didn't feel like at this point in time we could go completely without insurance on that equipment. So that's why you see the variance there. We had a couple of allocations that we make by journal entry, line locates, grounds maintenance, and distribution that just didn't get allocated before the end of the quarter. They will catch up in the second quarter. Those, by definition, will be exactly what we budgeted because it's an allocation that we make by journal entry. And then finally, as we've talked about before, our purchase power costs like Stanton 2 and OUC, what you see in here is always 1 month behind, because what we pay in October is for September, what we pay in November is for October, and so that's why you're always going to see these running about a month behind. Again, those are accounted for in our rate sufficiency analysis that we'll look at in a minute, where we match up a month's worth of purchase power expenditures to the actual month's worth of revenue and expenses. So you'll see that in a moment. Water and sewer, again, no revenue variances that meet the criteria for analysis. We're pretty well on our revenue estimates at this point for budget versus actuals. And then we've got a handful of line items, again, insurance, debt, we've talked about before, that are either not pro rata expenditures or that are off for normal reasons, nothing too exciting. And so with that, unless anyone has any questions, typically with the first quarter, unless something's gone terribly wrong, we don't see anything really out of whack, because we're just kind of getting the year underway. And so unless you have questions, that's all I had to say about that.
No, hearing none. Anybody have any questions?
Well, I have one that may be better addressed to the rate study, but I'll mention it here because it was in this package. Earlier on in the package, I really liked your bar graphs, which showed the revenues and the expenditures, with the red line showing the actual where it should be and the different components. I would find that very useful to have a breakdown of the purchase power cost going forward, to prepare that same graph.
Are we talking about these ones within the?
Yes.
Within the financial report?
Within the financial report. Maybe you could provide that to us between now and the next meeting and make that.
Would you want it by vendor? Because I've actually got that in the next piece of the package that we're going to look at. There actually is tabular data as well as graphical data on purchase power costs versus the estimate.
Is it? I'll apologize then if it is that bar chart that's by the different Stanton 1, Stanton 2, St. Lucie.
It's not within the financial statements. It's within the quarterly rates.
Okay, then
yeah, when we get there, let me show you what
Okay.
I have in there, and if that's not exactly what you're after, we can create something else from the
Okay,
data
thank you
that's
very
available.
much.
Because it won't, when we get to the rates efficiency, what we budgeted for purchase power, we did back in July. What you see in the rates efficiency for purchase power, which is really what the target we're after, is an updated estimate. When we budget in July and August, we don't have all the information from our purchase power vendors. So really come about October, when we make our real annual estimate, annual forecast of purchase power costs, is when we have really good information. And so you'll see a disconnect between the rates efficiency estimate and the budget estimate, because it's better information by the time we get to October. So I could do that with this, but it wouldn't be as meaningful as what you see within the rates efficiency, although I could add some graphical representation to the rates efficiency. So let's look at that.
Okay, great.
See what we can do with that. You do bring up a good point, though. One of the things I wanted to talk about that we have added in recent months to this quarterly financial report is actually on page, I should have tagged it, page 32. We have a quarterly balance sheet that we added just for the electric utility to show you where we sit with regard to cash and working capital, which is one of the things we've talked about extensively. As of the end of the first quarter, we are at $15.5 million of unrestricted cash. We've got about a little over 27 million of total cash, and we're at about 71 days of unrestricted cash on hand. Now, you'll remember at the end of last year, we were at 90, essentially. This is because we pay the entire debt service payment in cash in the first quarter of the year. So dropping down to 71 in December, not really outside the norm, because we had a $5.7 million debt service payment on December the 1st in cash. So this is normal, and we expect it by the end of the second quarter to recover back to the 80, 90 days that we were looking at.
If you annualize that payment, would be about where we need to be at the 90-day range? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah. I see us staying where we need to be. We ended the last fiscal year in a really good place, and when we look at the rates efficiency, you'll see that from a cash basis, we're break even, tiny bit more than break even. So I don't see our cash diminishing anymore. And that was after we'd made that cash payment to defease debt. We were still in a good place. So anyway, yeah, don't be alarmed by that 71. That's completely within the norm at the end of the first quarter because of that December 1st debt service payment. And we'll look at that again at the end of the second quarter. Any other questions or comments about the quarterly financial report? Moving on to the first quarter rate sufficiency. Should have received a package with a cover memo, again electronically, a summary of where we sit, and then some data regarding budget versus actuals broken out by sales, by revenues, and by purchase power costs. Bottom line here, we've put in October through December actuals for our revenues, our kilowatt hour sales, and our purchase power costs. And we're showing that with 3 months of actuals and 9 months of our projections, that we are still looking good at current rates through the end of the fiscal year. We have a margin of about $650,000, which as a number sounds big. As a percentage of revenue, is only about 0.7%. So as we've discussed before, we have rate sufficiency, but we're running it nice and close to the bone. And what we're suggesting that we do is leave rates where they are because they are sufficient until we have the results of the electric utility rate study that's underway and projected to be done here in March, at least on a preliminary basis. And on this one, Mr. Stradley, if you look at the Attachment B and Attachment C, at the top of the page of Attachment B, we have the actual purchase power cost by provider for the 3 months. At the bottom of the page, we have the projected purchase power cost by provider for the entire year and by month. All these are by month. And Attachment C puts that information in a graphical format in total. So if what you were looking for is by provider, we can do that with this data. But Attachment C shows the total purchase power cost forecast versus actual. And again, this forecast in total is a little bit different than what you see in the adopted budget because this is based on more current information.
And so this is based on, after we do our budget, a few months later, we receive the projected cost from the FNPA for what they're going to charge us per megawatt hour.
Right.
And we don't go back and amend our budget.
We do eventually for the end of the year, or if we do a mid-year amendment, we true it up. But what we do from a management standpoint is, as long as it's not too far off the mark, it doesn't throw us into a state where we don't have rate sufficiency, then we just use those numbers going forward for the year to monitor against for quarterly rate sufficiency.
But these numbers on Schedule Attachment B are the actual projections that we received from the FNPA?
They are. Okay. And when you look at the very first page of this summary of revenue and expenses, the total number you see for purchase power is 3 months now of actuals and 9 months of projection. So as each quarter marches forward, it becomes more reality and less projection.
But that's my question. Which projection is it? The projection in June or the projection in October? It's
the most current projection.
Okay.
This rate sufficiency used the real numbers that we got from FMPA.
Okay.
So the projection at the bottom of Attachment B is not exactly the same as the budget. If you looked at the totals by provider, it's not off really far because actually in this case we came out pretty close. There's some years there's been more of a disconnect. It's not off a lot, but it is not exactly the same as the adopted budget.
Okay. Well, then again, I appreciate these graphs, these line graphs, and but I found that the bar graph that you did for the financial analysis was very useful too.
Okay.
And it wouldn't be too much trouble to add that by power provider and with the actual most current projection versus actual. So
sure, yeah, I could do that. I was just visualizing that in my mind, so not a problem.
All right, thank you very much.
Any other comments? Bill?
Just a question of clarification. Cynthia, that rate sufficiency study, when is it due out in March?
I did want an opportunity, if we were finished with this, to talk about that. We have met and obviously worked extensively with the vendor or a consultant for the last month or so. We believe they'll be ready to present preliminary results to the commissions, which would then, formulate a final recommendation to council sometime in March. So if it's okay with this commission, I know you wouldn't normally meet again in March, but if it's all right with you, I will work with Sherry to try to schedule a meeting date that works for everyone, so you can talk with our consultant and look at the preliminary
normally meet
results.
That was the point of my question. Would it?
Yeah, good question.
Yes, you do. You just might want to change your normal meeting day to so you
I mean, you have it by
combine
the
it all.
15th or by the...
I will, if you have a meeting date already, what we'll do is do our best to make that, since you were already.
Well, we
we'll
usually
talk
meet
with
the
them.
second Tuesday, whatever
Okay.
that...
Yeah.
You know what that date is?
They should be able to hit that. I won't make promises on their behalf because I'm not in control of it, but we'll target your normal meeting date.
I would think it'd be important enough if you don't have it ready by the second Tuesday that we have
We
enough
can
time
meet
to consider
third.
that we meet a later date, so we make sure we
Okay.
have that available for the meeting.
The
I should
10th,
be-
the
I-
10th is the second Tuesday. The 17th would be the third Tuesday. Would you rather have the 17th?
That would probably be better.
17th would be better for me, too.
All right, that's fine.
Oh, that's a council
Anybody
meeting.
else?
Wait, that's
Rick?
a
I'm
council
not sure.
meeting day.
I don't have my
Okay.
calendar with me.
But if they're at night,
Is that an evening council or morning?
The 17th?
The 17th.
yeah, that's fine. I mean, unless it's-
That would be fine. We will have it on the council.
we actually won't. We have to take it to the finance commission as well, and they.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah,
Well, they can meet before.
they could go to.
Well, if you already have a meeting scheduled, we should
Well, we-
look at that by the second
normal-
weekend.
If we can. I mean, I honestly prefer the 17th. Only if you want a package ahead of time.
Point would be, we'd like to have that, I would like to have it at least a few days before we're going to sit in consideration of it, give us an opportunity to review it ourselves and come prepared to discuss it.
If it would help, we've had joint meetings with the Finance Commission before.
Right. I don't know when they meet, usually Thursday.
But Mr. Whittle's been very open to that.
We'll just take it to the
I'm
council.
Mr. Gorey.
We'll take it to council in April.
On the first meeting of April, and that way we'll have time to also. The Finance Commission is already having a special call at the end of February, so they're going to have yet another special call in March in order for them to look at it as well before it goes to council. And I haven't met with them yet, so I don't want to crowd them in terms of the number of meetings they have to have. So if you're good with the 17th works for us.
So long as we can get it in hand by, say, at least the 15th or
We should be
14th.
able to.
That way we have something to come to the meeting with.
We should be able
Rick?
to do that.
No, but everybody else
I know
all right
I'm
with the
traveling
17th?
1 week in March, so
And that's it.
I'll be gone the fourth week in March, but I'll be gone from the 20th on, but the 17th is all right.
Okay.
Ted.
And I have just one other question, and this is more with respect to January and our Chamber of Commerce weather we've been having. I see we're spiking revenue a little bit in January. Do we anticipate that that's going to track, or is the revenue going to actually be?
And actually, I have the January revenue, and it is almost right on. It's maybe 100,000 less or so than the estimate. I don't have the January purchase power costs,
Well, I
but I do
understand,
have the
yeah.
January revenue, and the January revenue is 7,313 as opposed to 7,452, which was our estimate. So it's not too far off.
Okay, so
If you look, and thank you for letting us point that out. If you look at attachment C. On the kilowatt hour sales forecast and the billed revenue forecast, we are so spot on that you actually can't see the blue line for the red one. So over the course of about 3 years of refining this, working with Tom Richards, working with OUC's forecast, and working with the city's actual experience for the last 3 years, we managed to dial that in pretty well. So
good, and
Good.
hopefully we've not established a trend line on purchase power cost.
It goes up?
The way it's been going up like that.
I like the way if the blue line is the actual, so I like the way it was down in November.
Well,
that makes me pretty happy. So
Yes. I'd like to see it, however, been continuing down.
look at last year. Again, it was kind of a this and that depending on the outages, because that makes a big swing. And pretty much, at the end of the year, fairly spot on. Tom's done a really good job of working with our suppliers to estimate the cost and the variable cost. But certainly, the reason for the rate study is that the rate consultant has the ability to conduct a much more sophisticated analysis of the demographics of the data and put together a model that should track much better than the staff model, which is at a very high level. So
I think I'm good for the 17th. I'm traveling the 21st to the 27th.
So am I, so that's good. All right. Well, we'll meet on the 17th then.
okay.
Sherry? Okay. Anybody else have any questions for Cindy?
Just as a preliminary, if Mr. O'Connor pointed out, we have met with them on a preliminary basis, and basically just as a preface to what the consultant will be saying is, as we've talked about before, there's rate sufficiency and then there's rate structure. So certainly one of the things they'll be sharing with you is their analysis of whether the different pieces of our rate structure are sufficient to the matching costs, if you will, and they're going to suggest to you a few different ways to true that up. But more importantly, I think what they're going to suggest is that there's really two pieces to their study, which is what should we do right now as we have this going concern, and what should we do after we get the results of the optimization study, because that's where the real potential for rate reduction is going to come. Right now we have rate sufficiency, and so it's really more a matter of rate structure. But down the road, once we have either modifications to our contracts and or other suggestions for our optimization, that's where their modeling could then produce some reductions in rates in conjunction with what they call cost of service. In other words, allocating the right costs, the right buckets of cost to the right portions of the rate structure. And so that'll be, part of the conversation. Certainly in conducting their analysis, they have some thoughts regarding how we fund capital, which I know has been a big conversation, and so that'll be some of what they have to share with you. In terms of a full 5-year projection, I think what we're going to do is hold off on doing that until we have information from the optimization study and from the results of the negotiations with the power providers about what the next 5 years is going to bring. It doesn't make a lot of sense for them to just run out of 5-year on the status quo when the status quo is shifting right now, and we won't know for probably 6 months or so where it's going to end up. So that's just a little bit about what they'll be sharing with you. But they've got some good information, and they've done some great analysis of the city's billing data and demographic data that they're going to share with you. So I think it'll be interesting for you.
I know one thing I'm looking forward to hearing from them is the we have right now a large increase in our rates between 1,000 kilowatt hours and above, and I believe we justify that for conservation purposes. However, I don't know that I've ever, in the 30 years that I've been here, that I've ever had that explained to me just as a customer. Mm-hmm. I understand it because I'm on the commission. And so, I don't know that if it's working for conservation purposes, if the people don't know that they can save money if they conserve a little bit. And just anecdotally, with respect to last month's bill, I was 74 kilowatts over 1,000, and we had 32 days, and I was averaging 34 kilowatts a day. So it kicked me into the higher rate structure because it had a longer month. But, so it's something that if we do have a conservation rate structure, we need to be publicizing that we're doing this. We're charging you more so that you use less because we're trying to conserve energy, which is something that I'm looking forward to seeing what their take is on that.
Right. Part of their scope was to look at that at the break point and give us some information regarding what the industry standard is and also what our average residential customer uses in the context of that break point. So they've got some of that data. And again, I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. I think for everyone here on the Utility Commission, as you have the expertise and know what you're talking about, this should be an interesting for you.
About 6 months out of the year, I go over that. 6 months, I'm under it.
Yeah.
I would suggest, too, there's enough meat there's enough meat in this conversation that you might not want to load your agenda up with a lot of other stuff. That's just a suggestion if you can avoid it, because this is a good meaty conversation that I think you want to take the time for. So.
What's that? Well, next time.
The rate consultant's presentation.
Right. Next time we'll just stick on that. All right. Next item is the FMPA audit. Now, I hope you all either watched the city special call meeting or the county special call meeting and have seen all of the comments and know what all the problems with the audit are, so we don't have to go into that in detail. And if you all watch that, I would like maybe we go on with what has happened since then, which, Jim, you want to tell us what's happened?
Well, as you know, the City Council passed a resolution, and the mayor put a cover letter on that, sent it out to all the mayors of the cities that are members of the FMPA.
And to FMPA, right?
Pardon me?
Did you send a copy to FMPA also?
Yes, they would go to FMPA. And then that resolution, really what it is asking for is a third-party oversight to review the processes and the operation of FMPA and give recommendations back to the board as to how to make changes that are necessary and that are possible that to help us sort of reduce our cost and overhead of the operation. So the intent really is to bring in that third party that would be unbiased and have the management skills to look at the processes that are followed. We have also been in conversation, i.e. myself and our attorneys with FMPA, and talking about the concern and issues that we have had with the processes that have taken place and the concerns we have on the audit itself. And then last week I was at a city and county managers, Florida city and county managers meeting over in St. Petersburg, and got an opportunity to talk to a couple of the city managers from the cities that are represented on the FMPA board. Again, expressed our concern of the audit. One of the people that I talked to was the city manager in Green Cove Springs. I know she's gotten a lot of attention in the newspaper, and sort of when she and I were talking, her response is she thinks that the answer to the problem is through legislation. So she is meeting with their delegation and talking about that. I don't think she really has an answer per se. And talking to cities like Jacksonville Beach, they do have concerns about it. They're not really sure how a third party would play in a role, but they understand that more than likely we have to do something. And so I think the attention's there to try to address the concerns and issues. Questions?
Well, Mr. Old, do you have anything to add to that? Have you been to a meeting up there since?
Randy Old, 935 Seagrape. Yes, I went up to I got a copy of the audit on a Wednesday night, and the next morning was an executive committee meeting and an audit committee meeting, and I went to both of those. And that was, I'm going to say, 10 days ago, something like that. And it basically, the audit was not mentioned. It was not discussed, really, the audit from the state. It was talked about very quickly, that we've got it. Any comments, no comments, then let's move on to the next item. And I brought it to the attention of people there, and they said that in essence, most people had not read it or received it, and so they expected not much in the way of comments. We've had a resolution here through the city council, and then there are two meetings next week, one on Monday, I think it is, and then one on Thursday, and I'm going to both of those.
At FMPA?
At FMPA, yeah. I've attended all the meetings since I've been on the since I've been appointed to the FMPA board, and I've talked to the CEO. I've talked to the council, two council members, and said that what we're recommending, we're taking this seriously. We think there's a real problem here. There seems to be an issue with management, an issue with making decisions that are incorrect, and that we need some kind of outside party that's arm's length, that's not a friend of the family, to come in and do a good analysis of it and to recommend changes in the management and any other controls that are necessary. I think one of the issues is that we, as Vero, don't have a lot of leverage with FMPA, and that we're thought of as kind of the bad boy. So we're how much I'm going to be listened to, and how much I'm going to be heard, or how seriously people are going to take any comments that I have, I question, because the audit was initiated from here. We've been sort of throwing darts at FMPA for a long time, and so for me to go up there and say, now, you got to fix yourself, and listen to me about how to fix yourself, I think I'm going to have a problem. But that's what I'll be doing on next Monday. Yeah.
Okay, well, at least the letter went to the city councils, and one of the problems with FMPA is that the city councils aren't voting members. I mean, they appoint people that are voting members, but the members of the city council don't go themselves.
There are, in some cases they do, but not. I really
87, Mr. Old, 87% of the voting members are bureaucrats. 13% are
could be. You don't. As a new member, I don't know who everybody is. I know the cities who are there, but I don't know the background of each one of the people. So as I understand it, they're utility people that are there, but I really don't know. I know some of them are city council people, but very few. Yeah.
Well, according to the audit and this updated director's contact information as of February 4th, I reviewed that, and there were 4 that were elected officials, 4 people that were accountable to the voters.
Yeah.
And the balance, 87%, are, people that aren't accountable to the voters. They're bureaucrats, and so we have a huge bureaucracy here. This is what my take from reading this audit is: we have a bureaucracy that's dysfunctional, and I question why they need to hire a third party to come in and tell them that they need to follow their procedures. 6 of the 13 points that the state raised were failures to follow their established procedures. I can tell them that for free. Follow your established procedures. 4 of the 13 were for taking excessive risk. That's something that we've been talking about here, and particularly on this committee and at the city council for years. 2 of the 13 just dealt with poor management. And 2 of the 13 dealt with amending the ARP, and that adds up to more than 13 because some of these fall into both categories. But I really don't understand why, why they need a third party to tell them follow their procedures.
I happen not to agree. I think a third party coming in would make a difference. First of all, I think it's a much more complicated business than the structure allows to be run. I think it should be run by a smaller group that knows what they're doing. A large group running something like this is very difficult. I mean, for me as a city council member to understand about hedges or swaps or whatever I don't think it's correct. I don't think I should be making those decisions.
Well, first of all, I don't think they should be doing that.
Fine. Then they ought to be saying.
I mean, that's one of the things they ought to stop
Yeah.
and get out of doing.
It's clear. I mean, a lot of this is accountant language, which, like all professions, we have language to obscure things. But when we talk about, an accountant talks about an ineffective hedge, here's really speculating. And when you look at the language with respect to the policy, and this is our job, Mr. Old, is to advise you from our expertise to help you with this.
Thank you. I've had a lot of accounting background. My background is finance. I've read lots of audits. It's been my life is reading audits.
I understand,
Yeah.
but I'm questioning why, and I'm glad you're here reaching out to us to get our input on this, and I'm glad that Mr. Whittle put it on the agenda.
Yeah.
And I'm saying when you read in normal everyday language, an ineffective hedge is a speculation. When they're saying in this audit report that they're trying to capture the up and the down of the swings of the market to make revenue, they're actually going in and speculating. They're not hedging.
Yeah.
That's, very, very simple futures contracts. We need to be hedging in the gas market to fix the cost, not to make a profit. They have continued to do that. You would think after 2009, when they lost $140, $180 million in 1 year, that they would have stopped. And obviously, they've not stopped, and their policy hasn't changed. I think that's something that we can address, and the other city council need to know. And we've been Cassandra, sitting here saying, look at this, look at these problems. But now we have proof that these problems are there. I think that I think there needs to be an optimization study of the organization. I think that would be a useful tool, as we've used the optimization studies here for our water sewer, and we're doing one now for our power system. But to address these issues that are raised, to address the 6 of the 13 issues where they don't follow the procedures, where the CEO and the general counsel submit and get reimbursed for their wives' travel, which is a direct violation of the policy, which the CEO should know, and which the general counsel should know. And the general counsel should advise the CEO of the policy if the CEO doesn't know the policy. They went back and they tested the years after the audit. They tested the years 2010 to 2014. There was a reimbursement of over $5,000. If you average that out, based on the 2 years the state pointed out, it happened every year that they tested that the CEO and the general counsel were reimbursed or were paid, did not reimburse for their wife's travel, which is a direct violation of the policies and procedures. If our counsel found that our general manager was violating our procedures for his own pecuniary interest, I think we would be very upset about that. If our general counsel, our attorney, was not advising our general manager, our city manager, of these procedures, and in fact violating them himself, we would be very upset about that. I don't think it takes a third-party consultant to go to the board of directors and say, we need to be very upset about this. They're either ignorant of the policy and procedures, or they're negligent and knowingly violating the policy and procedures for their own pecuniary interest. I don't know which one it is. I don't have those facts. I can't imagine that either excuse would be valid. And so I think these things need to be addressed now by the board. And I think, as Mr. Whittle's letter, a very good suggestion in it is that we should suggest to the other cities that they have elected officials there, that they have people that have to deal with budgets and have to deal with people and voters we can't just raise our budget to whatever we want it to be here at the city. You struggle. You haven't yet, but I've watched city councils in the past struggle and weigh, well, we're going to have to cut this, or we're going to, because we need to do that. And there's a give and take and a back and forth. We have lifeguards, we have mowing, we have all these different things that go into our budgetary process. And it's all accountable back to the voters and the taxpayers. In this situation where we have 87% of the people that on the board of directors that aren't disciplined by the voter and don't have that culture of being disciplined by the voter to hold the budget down, we have these budgets that are out of control. And if you look at the cost, the employee benefits cost up 173% over 5 years. And then notwithstanding the other issue where the general counsel doesn't have a written contract and they can't even establish through the minutes what the contract is. The general counsel's responsibility is to make sure that the policies and procedures are followed. They should be followed. His first job needs to make sure they're followed with respect to himself. I can't understand why there's not more outrage on the part of the board when have these things pointed out. I can't understand why these people that, maybe they got it just the night before. Maybe they were advised that we need to wait for the 30-day period to see the official response of the FMPA. I'm looking forward to the official response of the FMPA, which will be coming up, I think, in about 2 weeks. But I think that I would like to see the city speak to the other cities directly and say, we need people that are disciplined by accountability to voters and disciplined in this budgetary process, and just are not willing to give another government worker everything he wants. I know that Jim comes in every year with a proposed budget, and you're here for a week going over each line item. We got to do this, we can do that. That's a valid discipline, and that culture that exists in every elected official, I think, is essential to the management of this organization, and we don't have that. We don't have that. I think that a typical, and I'm not present company accepted, a typical utility director would love to be able to get anything he wants at his own utility, so he's happy to give everything he wants to the utility that he's overseeing. I think that, and then, so I think we need to reach out to these other cities, as Mr. Whittle suggested, and say that we need voting members, voting or elected officials to run this organization. I think that would solve a lot of the problems, or would at least mitigate the problems. And I don't think we need a third party to cost hundreds of thousands of dollars to tell us to follow our established procedures. We need to do RFPs. We need to not, there are some procedures that need to be changed. Like, I can't understand this mileage, and I'm incredulous that there's mileage and an automobile allowance. And we need to look hard. The board needs to look hard at the answer from the general counsel with respect to the general counsel's own contract and the general counsel's behavior. I would like to take that part of this, make the suggestion that we talk about your letter, Mr. Whittle, and there's some things in it that I think are maybe a little too detailed, but I think that's definitely something that we need to recommend to the City Council. I'm also now I'm going to editorialize about the peak shaving in the ARP contract. It doesn't affect us personally at this city, but the fact that Fort Pierce Utility Authority, who, because of the nature that they run one of the major plants for the All Requirements Project, they have the information in advance of what the demands are going to be, and they use that information. They use that insider information to manipulate their own demands is reprehensible on the part of the Fort Pierce Utility Authority. They're trading an insider information for the benefits of Fort Pierce at the cost of all the other members of the ARP, which thankfully doesn't affect us. With respect to the termination agreement of the ARP, something we've talked about many times here. And I'm glad to see that the state saw that and picked up on that. We've been billed $3 million to mitigate an oil spill that never happened, and we have no recourse. We have proof. We have studies that show there's no environmental damage. But as on our exit bill to leave the ARP, we've been billed $3 million, $3.5 million. And we have no recourse. We have to accept that because that's the way the contract's worded. So I'm glad the state picked up on that too, and hopefully there'll be a process to amend the ARP going forward. But with respect to that, I hope that you'll take yes, we've been the bad boy, but we've been the bad boy for a reason. There's been problems. We've seen it. Ms. Turner has come back and said they just approved a huge budget increase during times that all of our governmental entities here were scrimping and saving and cutting everything we could and laying off employees and trying to run as lean as possible so we would not raise taxes during the recession. They just raised rates. Didn't matter. It's a couple pennies, a dollar or two here. Yes, we've been the bad boy. We have. We've been the pain. We've been the thorn in their paw. But there's been a reason we've been that person. And we need to continue to be that person. And we need to take leadership to make this organization be efficient, make them follow their procedures, make their management follow their procedures, particularly with respect to themselves, particularly top management who break procedures for their own pecuniary interest. I think there needs to be outrage at that. There needs to be outrage at that. So, with respect, they need to start following their procedures now and not wait 6 months, 8 months for a consultant to come in and say, hey, this is your travel procedure. Follow it. They don't need,
I have a different idea of that, of a third-party person coming in and maybe recommending some management changes, maybe recommending a new structure that is different. It is not well run in lots of different ways. For it to look at itself and go ahead and follow the procedures, I think that's a Band-Aid versus what really needs to be done. I think fundamental changes to the organization have to be made, and I think a third party that's not a friend of the family coming in and doing it is the way to go, and that's just my opinion.
Well, I agree with you.
Yeah.
But to sit back and to say we need to make fundamental changes, so we're not going to apply a Band-Aid while we're bleeding, I disagree with that. I think we need to apply the Band-Aid now.
I think I completely agree with you.
Okay.
What bothers me is
I think that'll come back in this reply to the audit that, okay, we've tightened up on this and this and this, the smaller things that need to be tightened up on the expense things. I think that's fairly easy to do, as you know. But it's the bigger issue of how to manage this going forward is the issue. It is such a complicated organization to run. That's the issue, that somebody from a city council going there and helping manage this thing is very difficult to do. Making the utility inside but baseball kind of utility decisions are really hard.
Well, that's where they need to hire the proper staff. But we can't let, again, I think they need to be the board of directors. The board of directors doesn't run the inside baseball of a business. They're advisors, and they oversee senior management. They look at the results, compare the results to projections, and say, senior management, you're not meeting your goals, so we need new senior management. That's the board of directors doesn't get into the nitty gritty. So that, and then I'm also I'm wondering what is the procedure that's going to go forward to make sure this is an impartial third party. Is it going to be hired by senior management? Who's it going to be accountable to? Who's going to set the scope of this? Is it going to be other utility directors? The audit board made up of 87% of other utility directors?
What I've recommended is that a group of 5 people set up an organization, set up a part of the board to pick this person and decide on a scope of it, and then approve hiring other outside people that would help it with this management idea.
What bothers me is that you're asking an organization that doesn't care and doesn't do what it's supposed to do to change. And yet, how are you going to force them? Well, if they don't care and don't do the things now, and you bring somebody else to tell them what they ought to do, what's going to make them do it? The board has to change. That's my point. The board itself, because the board, even the staff recommended a different financial advisor. But the board hired the guy that's gotten them in trouble over the last 8 years, not one of the 3, because he didn't even reply. To me, the board is completely incompetent, as well as the management. And we got to change them both.
If you do choose somebody, and the mechanism can always be gotten around, I assume. But if you do choose somebody that's outside, like a past attorney general or somebody that's beyond reproach and that's got his reputation to worry about, and he's the one that chooses who needs to come in and look at this thing, then you get someone impartial, someone outside, someone that really has got his reputation on the line to get this thing done. And I'm counting on anger from the board, like we have, to say we need a change. Let's listen to this guy. Let's put in what he says. That's what I'm counting on. And maybe I'm naive. Maybe I'm not going to get anywhere, and the thing's not going to change at all. But it needs to be some kind of outside force that's got another reputation to worry about to come in and do something. It can't be a friend of the family. It just can't be. It's got sort of too many friends of the family. It's got lots of issues, and they're big issues. And I don't see asking it to fix itself by any means. It's got to be some outside group that really has got a big reputation, a strong reputation to get it fixed.
Well,
Mr. Chair,
go ahead.
I tend to agree with Mr. Olds that internal policing by an organization is rarely effective. In fact, it's probably never effective because of all of the connections that people have within and interests and loyalties and what have you. The only way to police or to monitor an organization, whether it's Wall Street or anything like that, is by having an effective monitoring organization outside of the organization being monitored with the powers to ask and demand responses to serious questions and publicize so that they are utilizing public opinion as a lever to get changes made, as well as any other legal means that they might have.
I think we all agree with Mr. Old on that point. And I believe I've heard Mr. Old say that. I've said that. And I think if you look at business, you can have inside and outside directors. And the audit committee is never made up of inside directors. I don't know exactly how you would look at that here to make that same analogy. My opinion, I've expressed it already at the risk of being repetitive. I think that other utility directors would be more like an inside director in business, and city council people, as you are, would be an outside director. So I think that this committee that you select needs to be made up of outside directors. It needs to be made up of people that aren't buddy-buddy with the management, that aren't even in the same business. I think when the audit committee, I don't know what the makeup of the audit committee is, whether it's consists of, again, inside directors or outside directors, and again, I'm not sure exactly how that analogy will work out here, but one of the points is that the audit committee hasn't been following procedures. So the audit committee needs to follow procedures.
It's not run like a normal business.
Well, obviously.
Yeah, it isn't.
Obviously, people would be fired over this report.
It's fundamental issues. I mean, it's just fundamental issues.
The CEO and the general counsel would be fired over this report in the event of a normal business.
So it really needs to be rocked, and all I can think of, I mean, having it depend on its own committees and structure now to fix itself is not worth it. You've got to have somebody from outside who really has done this before, knows how to do it, got a reputation, can hire the people he needs to or something to go in. And it needs a really fresh look all the way through it.
How long is this going to take?
I couldn't tell you. I couldn't tell you.
So would you suggest...
You got 2 meetings next week. Hopefully they'll be about this audit and what's going to be done about it.
Right.
All right. I would suggest we postpone my letter till the next meeting and we get an idea of what FMPA is doing. If they're doing nothing, then we recommend to the city council they send out a modified version of my letter.
I would like to send out to the city councils that they have elected officials at this meeting, whether or not they're there to vote, that they have elected officials there. I think it's important.
Well, it's going to be kind of a little quick if they're going to have the meeting next week.
Right.
That's a little
And
problem.
I think it's really up to each city. I mean, some cities are really angry over this, and some cities are not. It doesn't come up on their radar at all.
Well, it shouldn't be the cities. It should be the citizens, not the cities.
I don't think many of the citizens even know about this.
Well,
I mean, in a lot of places.
Well, that's.
And I can't really speak for that because I really don't know. But
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, to me, I think we're trying to close the barn doors after the horses escaped. The third party has already been on board, the audit attorney general. Mm-hmm. And they've pointed out all the things that are wrong. Now, who's going to get them to change is the question. And I have some prepared remarks that I'd like to make, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
Fellow commissioners, I applaud Chairman Whittle's cause to action. However, I do not believe it is anywhere near strong enough action. I think bad boys we've been in the past. I think we should be worse boys in the future. Having read the recently submitted audit of FMPA, I found myself appalled by the lack of general business management practices uncovered by the Auditor General David Martin, such as absurd employee benefits calculated at an average of some $32,000 per year for the 73 full-time employees per employee. There were uncovered ridiculous travel expenses and dining expenses. In 2 instances, the dining expenses to FMPA for a dinner were over $3,000 each. These numbers are in our utility rates. Adding to expenses that are passed on to our ratepayers, you and I, that supply no economic value is the contract with their members to supplying benefits beyond employment for accumulated leave, which I believe should be taken annually by any hardworking employee to charge their batteries. In addition, sick leave accumulation, which in my opinion, sick days should be only available to an employee who's actually sick because a business cares about their employees, not so they can become rich. This calculated amount for just the CEO and general counsel
if they had retired on September 30th last year would be a whopping $355,000. For all employees, as of September 30th last year, it would be over $1.2 million. And continuing any benefits for any employee, especially the CEO, who may be terminated for cause, is ludicrous. These numbers are in our utility rates. The audit goes on to outline many other undisciplined actions and inactions at the FMPA, such as poor expense reporting, large expenses not quantified as for any public purpose, specifically prohibited of government agencies.
By law.
By law. A major flaw in practices was FMPA's not following their own manual's rules in many instances. In one important instance, however, they placed their organization at substantial risk of not uncovering potential fraud by not changing auditors according to their own term limits, established by their own policies and procedures. I know you've all read the audit, but I would be remiss if I didn't underscore the bad judgment and outrageously costly decisions FMPA management has made in other unacceptable financial decisions. I've read about some of the aforementioned poor practices in the papers, but haven't read in the press the severity of these financial contracts. The first is in their fuel hedging, which through complex trading practices went far afield of acceptable industry practices and not consistent with a simple fuel hedge, which from 2003 through 2014 has cost FMPA over $247 million. This number is in our utility rates. Additionally, FMPA in 2004 entered into a consortium with 6 other utilities to reduce the cost of natural gas by entering into 2 gas supply pools, which obligated them for their share of costs. FMPA never took any delivery of any natural gas. Its share of gas was sold on the open market. As of September 30th last year, that investment was valued at a deficit of $14.6 million, as the price of natural gas declined from $12 per BTU to approximately $4 per BTU. This number is in our utility rates. Lastly, and unbelievably, FMPA entered into interest rate swaps in 2006 to guarantee rates for a coal plant that, in their words, might not need permanent financing until 2012 or 2015. FMPA's cost share of this project was to be $624 million. They planned to issue bonds for this project, but decided in their infinite wisdom in November 2006, even though the plant might not come on in 2012 or 15, that locking in rates futuristically by issuing $700 million in interest rate swaps was a good idea. We all know that rates have done nothing but go down over this time frame, and these swaps, still unwound, are valued at a negative $155 million. These numbers are in our utility rates also. By the way, the coal plant was never built, and by the governor's executive order, it never will be built. Fellow commissioners, it's time the City Council demands an exit from FMPA for the many broaches and breaches of financial responsibility FMPA has repeatedly demonstrated. They are an organization that has run amok by contracting its members to obligations never bought into or envisioned, and has not fulfilled its mission of supplying our communities with reasonable rates. This audit by the state of Florida is the substance of the argument to demand release from prior contracts with FMPA on behalf of the city and the county of Vero Beach and the town of Indian River Shores. Our commission, through Chairman Whittle, should send a much more strong message to City Council that they demand its contracts with FMPA be canceled and allow a sale of Vero's system to FPL, which our constituents have directed time and again. They now have the ammunition and they should use it. That's the end of my remarks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Would any of the city council or the city manager like to address that?
You may take public comment too. Public comment.
I obviously do not want to supersede any city council member that wants to address it. But the fact of the matter is you have to follow the money. You can't just terminate contracts. Again, as the audit points out, there's $2 billion that are owed to somebody, and we're on the hook under those contracts to pay our proportionate share, or what is perceived as our proportionate share, subject to debate. But we spend an awful lot of money on attorneys to try to figure out how to get out of these contracts. FP&L spent an awful lot of money on their attorneys and their staffs to try to figure out how to get out of the contract. And OUC didn't spend as much as we did, or FP&L, but they also had their attorneys. But the key is we're talking about a $2 billion issue here. And I'm just not sure that you can go and insist on terminating a contract without those creditors being paid. And that's the question, is how to get those creditors paid.
If this were a business, if this were Enron, it would go bankrupt. And it's $2 billion today. Is it going to be $2.5 billion next year?
Well, that's where we as members have got to get control. But give you two examples.
Well, members get control, but Mr. Old is telling us they're not even taking us seriously.
Well, again,
they've got to take us seriously.
And I agree with that. I agree that they have to take us seriously. But I give you two examples in the electric utility business that are just really close at hand. TVA, Congress wanted to sell it. They couldn't find a buyer because the debt service was too high. The second, Duke Energy, they bought a power system and inherited a nuclear plant that's going to cost them somewhere in the neighborhood of $50 million, if not more, with a life cycle that's going to go another 50 years that will never generate a megawatt out of it. So these errors are not, I mean, these are judgment calls, and they were bad judgment. Obviously, nobody in this room, I'm not sure I know anybody other than whoever made the decision, and FMPA would have taken those Taylor swaps. I mean, that was ludicrous. But
they trained their own people. They didn't even bring in outside experts.
Yeah, so that, you know, how those decisions are made. But I give those other examples that TVA invested. Now they are starting to build back onto their nuclear plants. But the fact of the matter is there were a lot of decisions made, and they stopped them. And so I'm saying that in the industry there are bad decisions and bad business decisions that are made. But again, saying that we can just walk away from a contract, I don't think
we're walking away. I think we have proof positive that we've been taken to the cleaners, and and our people want that to stop.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. And I think that's some of the actions that the council is taking by sending it about the third party, just to give you my side of because I agree, I think there should be a third party that is unrelated. Two reasons for that. One is it's very easy for this organization, FMPA, if you're saying follow the regulations, well, we'll just change those. We'll pay for the wives of, I mean, it's easy for them to do, and it has no credibility whatsoever. So the third party, to me, becomes the credible entity that comes out and says, this is the process, and these are the changes that need to be made. And I think part of that evaluation is the evaluation of the abilities of those people making those decisions. The one name that hasn't come up that we all talk about in these decisions, the chief financial officer. If that audit had been here in the City of Vero Beach, not only would I be gone, but I think Cindy would probably have some issues too. And so it's a real combination of how they're doing. And even in the discussion, and that's why I'm saying that somebody needs to look down into the bowels of this organization and find out who is the advisor to the chief financial officer.
Well, the thing is, there is no accountability. They don't have to answer to anybody. And this is a kind of business I would have loved to have been in. When you make a mistake, you just pass it on to somebody else. You know, when you're in business, God only gives you 100%. If you go to 110%, you got a problem. And you're accountable to shareholders or whoever. They're accountable to the board. And that board apparently is either asleep at the switch or they're not pounding the table in the table that ought to be pounded. And
Well, what would happen? What power is this guy going to have to actually make changes other than to say you ought to do it? What would happen if FMPA declared bankruptcy?
Well, I don't think FMPA can declare bankruptcy.
Why not?
Because
not?
they have too many users. They have their
The plants aren't
customers.
gonna go
their
away.
customers are here. I mean, what court is going to rule that you can't go up on your electric rates?
Well, you say there's $2 billion worth of liabilities,
Right.
but there's also assets.
Correct.
Are there $2.1 billion of assets? $1 billion of assets? What's the fair market value of the assets?
Scott, remember we did the evaluation of our assets with FMPA when we were doing the negotiation. Ours is a negative number.
I understand.
So you can say we have that just adds to the $2 billion worth.
But in the event of, there are different types of bankruptcies. There's a bankruptcy where you close the business and you walk away from it and you auction off the assets. And there's the type of bankruptcy where you renegotiate the debts and you continue on as an entity. And that's generally what we see in businesses, and I think that's what we see in municipal bankruptcies. I don't know if the city of Detroit has declared bankruptcy or not, but the city of Detroit's not going to go away. So they need to look at, and that may be an option. And maybe they need to divest themselves of some of these contracts. I think where the FMPA really started to go off the rails is when they became a power producer. And that was our problem with the ARP, as I recall, and Mr. Whittle, you were here then, is that they were producing their own power and, again, doing things analogous to the peak sharing that hurt us with respect to our plant and our contractual agreements with them. But those plants have a value. They may be underwater, but they have a value. You're not going to sit back and you're correct. You can't just turn off the lights. But a municipal bankruptcy wouldn't necessitate turning off the lights. It would necessitate a reorganization to where the FMPA made sense economically. It may mean taking the ARP and disassociating the ARP from the FMPA. The idea of a municipal buying group where we would go out and pool our resources to buy shares of St. Lucie and the Stanton, that was one idea. The idea of going ahead and building the FMPA building their own power plants is something different and something that I don't think was envisioned at the start of the FMPA. And these are things that this third party needs to look at. But my concern is who's going to, how I haven't heard a credible method of selecting a third party that would be independent, nor a plan for how they would force the implementation of it. And
well, Green Springs is saying go to the legislature. And how about the governor?
Well, that may be, or the attorney general. Let the attorney general pick someone. But I haven't heard any suggestions along these lines of how we're going to do this, other than it can't be the FNPA issues an RFP for someone to come in and optimize their system, because they would control that. The management would control that. The management would control the scope of that. The organization is going to be paid by management. So I don't think that there'd be any credibility to that.
It seems to me that there's a whole culture in FMPA of not being too concerned about their customers and their procedures, and the culture originates at the top. If the chairman or whoever the executive who controls FMPA is not interested in those things, he's not going to push them. He's going to encourage them to let procedures slide. If he is a person, or he or she is a person who is, dedicated to making this a functioning organization responsive to the public good and to the good of its shareholders, then he will make those things happen. And that's exactly, I think, what's been going on, is that there are procedures. I'm sure that the chair had to know when those procedures were being violated, and he didn't do anything about it.
He was violating them.
Well, he was one of the violators, exactly. A chairman who is concerned about the quality of his organization and the quality of the service to their clients would not have done that and would have been much tougher on it. So even having a third party make proposals how to strengthen their internal procedures and so forth is not going to be 100% effective, if at all, if there isn't a change of attitude from the top management down, which means essentially one of the recommendations ought to be that FMPA search for a new chief executive, chief counsel, and a chief financial officer. Those are the three people who were essentially responsible for not following the procedures and not tightening up the procedures when they saw them being violated. And I think that, more than anything else, will put pressure if there is a call from all of the members of FMPA for a change in management and a change of philosophy in the management. And I don't know how you implement it, except maybe through, I don't know who appoints the chair of the FMPA. Are they selected internally, or are they appointed by the governor, or I don't know what the story is there?
They're appointed by the board. It's an independent agency. It stands independent, and the state's given it a charter. Mm-hmm. But that's one of the challenges that you have. It's an independent body and an independent trust given to the members. They elect their own chairman, and the chairman is like any other board member. He just chairs the board meetings.
But was he a board member before he became chair?
Yes, typically they elect from their board members the chairman. Now, there's a difference between your chairman and your chief executive officer and your attorney and your chief financial officer. The chairman is a board member selected similar to how we do our mayor.
Sure.
And that's sort of the standard in which they select. And then they have chairman of subcommittees that are elected, for example, all requirements. The voting members of all requirements, they have their own little subcommittee, and then they elect a chairman.
But the chief executive officer is selected how?
By the board, the total board.
Also from within the board?
No, sir. Chief executive is typically hired from outside. For example, the history of the chief executive now, he was with R.W. Beck Engineering prior to, he was an employee of R.W. Beck, an engineer, before he was hired as the chief executive officer of FMPA.
How long has he been there?
Yeah. Hasn't been that long, and I don't know the exact number of years, but
he's been there a number of years.
He wasn't here, for example, for the Taylor swaps.
Oh.
He was not an employee.
Okay, I got something. Judy, do you want to say anything? No, okay. We have 4 members of the city council here. They obviously understand that we're upset and we need things done, and we feel we need more done than what they've done. What I would suggest is, I've written the letter. You all look at it and modify it as you see fit. Let's wait for the 2 meetings that Randy's going to go to, is going to go to next week, and see what FMPA board says about those things, and come back and report to us what went on, and then we'll decide, do we recommend to the city council they send a much stronger letter to all of the cities or not?
Something I would also recommend is that we wait for the response from FMPA, then you have something in
Well, I
writing
mean, they'll already will
They'll have the response because we aren't having a meeting until March, and their response is due the 21st of this
30
month.
days, correct.
And Mr. O'Connor, the attorneys you spent so much money on already did not have this audit in front of them.
That is
before.
correct. That is correct.
They have it now.
And I'd like to make one more suggestion for Mr. Old. I would like to suggest that you suggest on behalf of the city that they form an internal audit function. Either they contract that out with the state auditor general, or they hire. I would prefer that, so that it would be independent. Or they hire their own in-house internal auditor that would follow up on these policies and procedures. It would be the Band-Aid, but I think we need to stop the bleeding. But that internal auditor needs to, again, the internal audit function in business is directly responsible to the audit committee, not to the CEO. They need to do that. That's something that I think is a very reasonable response to this state audit. My recommendation would be is that they contract with the auditor general to send an auditor in on a regular basis to perform an internal audit function. The financial auditor does not look at this information. This is all immaterial. The $5,000 that the CEO and the general counsel inappropriately took from the organization it's totally immaterial.
Yeah.
Their financial auditors are not going to look at that.
Yes.
That's not their job. But an internal auditor does look at that. And I will say this, I've been practicing accounting and advising businesses for over 30 years. And without fail, when I have had a client that has had fraud in the business, the owner of the business or the CEO is in fact himself stealing. Now it's on his own money, so maybe it's really not stealing. But I will tell them, and I will tell every new business client that I get, that if on Friday afternoon your employees see you ring up no sale and put $20 in your pocket, on the next Friday at noon, your employees will ring up a no sale and put $20 in their pocket. If the employees see you being fastidious about maintaining good controls, then the employees will know that they can't steal from you. That's been 100% of my experience when a client has had their employees stealing from them. Quote, the owner is stealing from them, from himself, and stealing from the government, not reporting sales or doing whatever he's doing. And so I think we need to look at the head of this organization.
As I said, I've read lots of audits. This is the worst one I've ever seen, without any question. And it's not the fact that it's something you really just you can get emotional about it. There's no doubt about that. It's easy, but the trick is to figure out a way to get to the other side, to fix the company so that it actually watches these things and makes good management decisions going forward. And the only way I can think of this is to get some kind of outside party to do this. I don't know of a way right now where you can ensure that the company and the company's board pick someone that's beyond reproach. I don't know a mechanism for doing that. What we've recommended is that a group of 5 set up an organization to do this. To me, if they don't have a really independent outside strong force to look at this and make all those decisions, like the audit, like the controls, like the management decisions, like the hedging, all those kinds of things, and the possibility of several personnel changes. If they don't do it, then there's going to be just mounting pressure, and we're not going to get anywhere before it is a huge eruption. So what we were trying to figure out, what I was trying to recommend is what I think might work. And there's ways around it. There's ways to fool with it and everything like that. But if they do it really with somebody independently and really make some good changes, then we'll at least have an organization, I think, that has some kind of a future. I think what I'm not a party to all the issues that have gone on here, trying to get out of FMPA. But we spent a lot of time doing it. This is not the first time. We did try to get out before. And it doesn't look like we can get out. And so if we can't get out, we got to fix it. And this is what I think is the reasonable way to do it. I may be wrong, but and I don't know what the reaction is going to be from the board, whether they're going to say, yes, let's do it, or no, we can do it internally, or yes, my friend, I know a friend, he can come and help us to do this. I don't know how it's going to work. But
well, that's what we want to hear next month.
Well, it sounds like, I mean, you're flabbergasted by the audit, no question about
Absolutely.
that.
I mean,
you're as flabbergasted as I am.
How can you help?
But then you point out to us that there's certain board members that just, it's like water off a duck's back.
There are a number. I don't know how many of you have been to a board meeting there, but there are probably 40 people in the room, and there are some very outspoken, strong people on that board that are really good people. There's no question about it. And that every little thing that comes up that sounds a little questionable, they are right on top of it. There's a number of really strong people in that organization. And
they're the ones for the right reason can make something happen.
They certainly could.
Well, that's
but I can't talk to them. The sunshine law, so you can't.
I just hope that we're not going to wait 6-9 months for this report to take the state's advice and wind. The state has suggested that we wind up the Taylor swaps, close them out. The state has suggested that we stop hedging or speculating, and let's use the proper term, speculating. And I just don't. I don't see the reason to continue these bad procedures for 3, 6, 9 months.
Agreed.
Stop speculating.
Okay, the board is now faced with 155 million, 54 million, depending on the day, loss. How do you take that loss?
You take it. You lost the money. You made a mistake. You screwed up.
Yeah.
Close it out. Don't hope. That they've been praying that interest rates are going to go back up over 3%.
You take it over 1 year, 4 years, 5 years, 3 years. It's going to be a hard decision for the board to make in this atmosphere. I mean, just practically speaking, it is.
And practically going back, there's been several opportunities to use these swaps. On the Emerson project, there have been other opportunities to use these swaps. They could have used them. And maybe the interest rates would have been a little higher on Emerson than they were able to get in the market. But they've been speculating on interest rates going back up and getting out.
Agreed.
And there's not long left in the swaps. They're gonna end
October.
So, and I don't think interest rates are going to be above 4% in municipal interest rates, by October.
You can be sure as soon as they do unwind the swaps, interest rates will go up.
So
I'd like to get back to a point that Mr. Stradley was making, that a large proportion of the board members are apparently like utility managers for the different
utility managers or city council or city managers.
City managers rather than city council members. Is that part of the makeup of the board that was specified, or is it that our city council chose to send a city council member to be their representative, whereas other city councils thought that city council members would not be in a position to be effective? I don't know. But if there was a higher proportion, I think, as you said, of city council members who'd had to face the kind of challenges and criticisms that our city council has faced in the last couple of years, that I think the board of FMPA would have been very different and would have reacted very differently.
What bothers me is you're a banker and you say you don't understand it. What makes you think that the people that they've sent in understand it. They
Well,
probably
it's
don't
a-
either.
Yeah, it's a quandary because, the utility manager that goes there understands much more than I do about the utility business. There's no question about
Maybe
that.
true, but not about the swaps. That wouldn't be in his area at
No,
all.
but I shouldn't be trusted with swaps, and I shouldn't be trusted with.
Well, neither
with
should
hedging.
they.
Yeah, neither should they.
Neither should they.
But
No,
this
okay,
is a business organization, not a
Yes.
utility organization.
Yeah.
It is.
And
Yeah.
the people
Okay.
who go there should be
Jay, you
business.
got something to add?
Yeah, briefly.
Yeah.
We're getting along here.
I'll try to be brief, but keep in mind, some of us have been dealing with this for an awful long time. What was in this audit report is really no surprise to us. The whole idea with the natural gas hedging. Roger Fontes was the CEO back then. You really had an upheaval within the FMPA about 4 or 5 years ago. They got him out. Nick Guerrero came back in and changed a lot of the investing practices, and now you're still dealing with the residue of that. So somewhat of what you guys are going through has already happened a number of years ago. So, if you guys run into a little bit of a lethargic energy on this issue, that's probably why, because a lot of them already did take action on this, and we're dealing with the cleanup on it. Quite frankly, you guys got a lot of great questions, and FMPA would be happy to answer them. I'm pretty sure they would. If you guys could just, get your questions down and send them back over to FMPA, I'm sure they'd be able to answer your questions. They are a public organization. They do have to answer those questions. Public information requests are honored there. So I would really encourage you to ask those questions to FMPA so that you get a really poignant and detailed answer.
Well, it's not so much the questions, it's how do you get them to enforce things that they're not doing, which they should be doing. If you answer questions, we already know the audit, and they're in the audit. But, even the audit shows that even, as you say, they reorganized 4 or 5 years ago, they're still not following procedures according to the audit.
Right.
And that's what we need to get straightened out.
And the policy is still to speculate on futures, natural gas futures. It's still to capture the upside and the downside at the same time. You can't do that in hedging. So they didn't change it 4 years ago because they're still doing it. Unless the Attorney General's audit is wrong. Is that fact? Are you saying it's factually wrong? I don't believe you are. It's either factually wrong that this is their policy now.
First of all, keep in mind, this is a draft audit, so FMPA has not responded to the accuracy of the Auditor General. And the second part, I really don't want to be the guy that wants to defend FMPA because I've already gone through the crud that they've done.
And it's pretty sad
Jay,
that the CEO wasn't there during the whole audit.
I've spent my time there, and I've seen how a lot of this stuff works. And good grief, there is an awful lot of cleanup. And be thankful that you're not over west side of the state dealing with Crystal River. That's even a lot worse than this.
And Mr. Kramer, I understand we've been together. We're not surprised by this. And over the years, we've seen these things, and we've addressed them. We've tried to address them, which has made us to be the bad boy there. And I appreciate that. But I'm looking forward to their response. And again, they need to make that response. I'd like to make one comment with respect to Mr. Old's comment about the difficulty in understanding the financial statements. I've looked at their financial statements very closely, and there are things that I really I don't understand, but at a fundamental, at an ontological level, I don't understand it, because I learned many years ago in the last century when I went to college that consistency is the hallmark of a good accountant. When you look at their report, and particularly the management report, and you look at the different projects, they use different terms for the same thing. If you look at the Stanton 1, the Stanton 2, the St. Lucie, and the I forget the name of the one we're not involved in, but there's another.
Tri-County?
No, not the ARP, but there's another entitlement that we're not involved in. The cost that they get from Florida Power and Light or OUC Southern for the respective things, they pay so much per megawatt hour. That's their wholesale cost that comes into it. They use a different term. They have 4 different entitlement projects. They use 3 different terms for that same cost coming in. That's inconsistent. That makes it very difficult to understand. You read about one project and you read this number with this one description. You read another project. The same number should have the same description. I don't know whether that's... I don't understand why that's done. Like I say, I don't understand that at an ontological level. It's not that I don't understand the numbers. I took my calculator out, I broke it down, and I understood that this number and this number are the same thing, but they call them something different. Why do they do that? Are they trying to make it difficult to understand?
Probably.
That's...
I could just encourage you to ask those questions. We can ask a million questions, but without a good qualified answer, it's not going to get us too far. I think you can probably ask some really good questions, and it would be really beneficial to the public if you could ask FMPA those questions. I would like to see them. I really would.
Okay. Maybe you should ask FMPA, send them those.
Okay.
Do that. I'd like to bring this to a close. It's 10:30.
Just comment, just to make sure we have the record, it's the Tri-Cities project.
Tri-Cities project. Okay, thank you.
I think we should wait till next meeting. Rick, you look at my letter and upgrade it the way you'd like to. And next week, if we don't see any movement on the part of FMPA, then I suggest we go forward with a letter to the City Council requesting them to send it to all the other city councils. But hopefully next month, Mr. Olds, when you come in, you'll give us some positive comments. But at least 4 members of the City Council are here. They understand how we feel, so does the city manager. So is that all right?
I think, Mr. Wood, before we adjourn, I'd like to make a motion that we do send a letter to the city councils recommending that they send elected members to be their board of directors. And I'd at least like to see if we have support for that today. So I make that motion that we recommend that city council send a letter to the other cities that their representatives on the board of directors of the FMPA be elected city officials or municipal officials.
I would think that that if we were going to send another letter outlining our outrage, that could be the first recommendation of the letter, and then maybe take more seriously at that time, as opposed to sending it naked.
Well, even if we send it now, it wouldn't affect the 2 meetings that are coming up, because they wouldn't get it in time to do anything.
Well, I'll second the motion. I think that the letter A recommendation or a suggestion from our council to other city councils of that nature, I think, is an important step. I mean, they can agree with it or not, but if we've made that recommendation and explained our reasoning for it, and as you say, point out some of the more egregious things in the audit, I think that we will have done part of what can be done, which is to start to mobilize public opinion into forcing those kinds of changes onto FMPA. I mean, in a stock company, if you had a report like this, their stock would have dropped 50%, and the stockholders would be howling for blood. We don't have stockholders, or we are the stockholders. We are the stockholders, so we should be.
The other thing is that we're making a recommendation. My motion is making a recommendation to the city council. The city council will have Mr. Old's input
before their meeting.
Before their meeting in 2 weeks, or next week. They don't meet this week, so you'll have that. I believe you'll be back. Have had this meeting before the next city council meeting. So they'll have our recommendation to send another letter with, again, my recommendation is limiting it to the makeup of the board of directors. And my motion is, and we could be more, the city council could take up and add more things to it. at that time, or they could decide to wait at that time. But we would be on record of at least they would have our endorsement of this for the next meeting.
All right. We have a motion on the floor and a second. Any other comment? You want to take a vote?
Mr. Baczynski?
Aye.
Mr. Russell?
Aye.
Mr. McDermott?
Yes.
Mr. Stradley?
Yes.
Mr. Shoup?
Yes.
Mr. Woodall?
Yes. All right. All in favor. And the city council already knows what we feel. They can get a copy of what I wrote, and they can, as you say, add to it depending on what happens. All right. Is there any other old business? I really don't have anything. Oh, I had that little brochure I got from Henderson, Kentucky that we might give to you all that was sent out by the Henderson water treatment, and it just gives some information. And if we could get that somehow out to some of our members, it would might help. Although Cindy says we've sent some out. I think, yeah. But that's all I have.
I would like to,
members. Yes.
I'd like to pass this analysis I did of the makeup of the board of directors down to Sherry to enter it into the public record and to pass it as backup for our motion to city council, to the city council members.
Anybody else? Have any member? All right. Our next meeting is March 17th. So with that.
Have you had public comment yet?
Yes, we have. And we asked. Judy didn't want to make any comment. She's here to see what goes on. Maybe she's got fed up with what we got. But unfortunately, I wish more people, members of the public, would attend. And we would have more public input.
Maybe we should give them pizza.
Get some pizza.
Papa John.
Yeah? All right. Yes, Judy?
Judy Orcutt, 4665 Pebble Bay South. Just one comment. I thought that there was a really good suggestion to send your questions into FMPA. Are you doing that?
Yeah, he's going to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, we've invited FMPA to come to.
I mean, in writing.
Yeah, no, I will do that, but
Okay.
We've invited them before, and they
in the
just
motions,
declined.
I didn't hear that that was going to happen, and I think that's important to make sure that happens. Okay, thanks.
All right, we are adjourned then.